Services Committee. Maria?
I am Maria Ortiz, co-chair, and this is our monthly meeting. This is held the third Thursday of every month. This is our December monthly meeting. The meeting is being recorded and live streaming on YouTube, and it will be accessible after the meeting. The agenda materials for tonight's meeting are public. They can be viewed on the website in the Dropbox. If you don't receive the e-blast, I encourage you to sign up. And if this is your first meeting, the main three important things to know is after each presentation, the committee is going to ask their questions or make comments. Then the members of the public or the attendees get the chance. In order to speak, if you're an attendee, please raise your hand, which should be on the bottom of the screen somewhere. After the attendees speak, the discussion goes back to the committee for the business section. And on some items, committee members, we do vote to write a resolution that goes before the next full board meeting for a vote. And let's do self-introductions, starting with Betty. Uh-oh.
Come back to Betty because you got to find it. Katie.
I got it. Hi, Betty McIntosh, resident of Chelsea and South, member of this committee. Thank you.
Can you say what other committee you're sitting on, please?
Chelsea Land Use.
Katie?
Hey, I'm another Chelsea resident, Katie Stokes, and I also sit on the Arts, Culture, and Education Committee.
And Street Life, the S for Street Life. Leslie Williams?
Hi, Leslie Williams, Hell's Kitchen, member of Chelsea Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee as well.
And JD?
Good evening, JD Nolan, the co-chair of the Hell's Kitchen Land Use and Zoning Committee and a member of the West 48th, West 47th Street Block Association.
Jessica Chase? Oh, Jessica, I mean, excuse me.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jessica Chait. I'm a Chelsea resident, and I'm also the co-chair of Chelsea Land Use.
Roberta?
Hi, Roberta Barnett, Chelsea resident, member of the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee, in addition to this one. And yeah, those are the things.
Thanks. Yadira?
Good evening, everyone. Yadira Jimenez, a Hell's Kitchen resident and also a member of the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee.
You and let me see. Dolores.
All right, come on. Why are you going to make fun of my bed head? I'm sorry.
No, it looks nice. I think it looks nice.
Yeah, it's like getting out of bed.
I want to make mine fluffy too.
Dolores Rubin, Hell's Kitchen resident, member of the Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee, Budget Task Force, a whole bunch of other things, and I'm on this committee.
Thank you. Hector?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Hector Vasquez from Fulton's Tennis Association in Chelsea. I'm also a member of the Land Use Committee as well as this committee, and I'm happy to be here tonight. Happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you, Aurora, and then we will go to Pete Diaz. Pete, Aurora?
Hi, everybody. I'm Aurora Cruz. I'm a member of Hell's Kitchen, and I'm on this committee as well as ACES. Oh, happy holidays. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Pete. I'm a member of this community, and I sit on the committee as well.
All right.
Happy holidays.
Guys, let's say it again. Wait a minute. Hold on. So for the first item on our agenda, I will be managing some of it unless Joe, you want to add something to.
I just want to do an intro. I just want to do an intro and also lay out our meeting for tonight. So we have two items on our agenda. The first one is the social service plan for 705 10th Avenue, also known as the MTA site. That is a site that the board has been involved with since 2009 and spent a lot of time on ULURP during 2022. This is not the proposal for the housing. That's already settled, finished, ULURP completed. Hopefully construction will start sometime next year. This is the social service plan specifically for the homeless family component that was injected into the building, into the proposal as part of the process. So we're going to hear from the Actors Fund, was the Actors Fund, now known as the Entertainment Whatever Fund. You say it, even though you say Actors Fund on some of your things, which we're going to call you that for a while.
Excuse me, Joe, with apologies. Isn't this the DEP site, not the MTA site?
Oh my God, it is. Not apologies. Yes, it is the DEP site, period. I apologize. On 10th Avenue, between West 47th and 48th, on the west side of 10th Avenue. I want to just
48th, 49th, Joe.
Oh my God, shoot me, guys. 48th and West 48th and West 49th. I very rarely make address mistakes, but I'm doing it tonight. So I want to note to everybody, we have two items on the agenda. The other one is the conversion of Bayview prison, the former Bayview prison, also known as the former Siemens YMCA on West 20th Street and 11th Avenue. We have a presentation by the Empire State Development Corporation. They last night presented at the Chelsea Land Use Committee. Our committee has a different angle on this, and we'll talk about the affordable housing and the social services for that proposed project. And I want to caution the members of this committee. We have postponed 705 10th Avenue social services for a long time. They're here tonight, but we cannot spend exhaustive time with them because the Bayview item is a proposal, comment from the committee, and discussion with the Empire State Development, and second, from the public. Also know this is not the only time we'll take this Bayview up. Tonight is our first go at it. We're going to be coming back again in January in order to get comments in place to the state, ESD as the agency that is putting out a request for proposals by our February meeting. So we have a lot of time, probably have a public meeting in there too about this. So let's start out with the Actors Fund and introductions first from Daniel, and then you'll introduce your team. But in the meantime, we've been joined also by committee member Paul Ames from West 50th Street, public member.
Great. Thank you, Joe, and thanks for the introduction. My name is Daniel. I'm the executive director of the Actors Fund Housing Development Corporation, which is a subsidiary of the Entertainment Community Fund. And I know you all know it as the Actors Fund, so you can continue to call us that. I'm also joined by my colleague Tracy, who is the director of social services and activity at our residences, and really brings a wealth of knowledge about stabilizing vulnerable tenants in this community, and also an important clinical perspective too. As Joe mentioned, we're talking about 705 10th Avenue, the DEP site, more specifically the housing retention and stabilization services that will be provided there for a segment of the population. And I'll give some high-level details of the project. I know so many of you know about the project because we have moved through ULURP and worked very closely with you all on that. Then I'll dive in really to the intent around the program, scope of services, and let you know where we are at selecting a provider and putting that plan together. And then we do always look forward to your comments and feedback after that. So I'm going to dive in with a PowerPoint. Can I get a thumbs up if you see the deck? Great, thank you very much. So I know most of you are familiar, but the Entertainment Community Fund is a national human services organization. We provide support services for everyone in the performing arts and entertainment community. Our core programs include social services, which is probably our most robust program, health, workforce development, and of course, housing. Our housing work is threefold. We do educational programming to help people access housing through the lotteries, advocacy, and then marketing and development of housing like Rialto West at 705 10th Avenue. Just to add, our headquarters are in Times Square. That's where our social services team is. We also own and operate the Friedman Residence, which is 100% affordable housing with on-site social services, serving a mixed population on West 57th and 10th. We also provide social services on-site at Manhattan Plaza as well. So just some of our kind of deep roots in the community. As a reminder, I'll try to keep this brief. The project is located at 705 10th Avenue. Our development partner on this is Douglaston Development. As a reminder, the site is located just west of 10th Avenue between 48th and 49th Street. Dotted red line indicates where the residential building will be built over that Amtrak rail cut. And then, as I think probably you all know, because you've all been involved with this a lot longer than me, the adjacent open space, which will be operated by Parks. Brief details on the program. It will be an 8-story residential building, 77 feet tall. There will be approximately 158 affordable units in the building. More than half of those will be 2 and 3 bedrooms. You can get a sense of the unit mix, studios 1, 2s, and 3s. On-site amenities will include laundry, fitness room, and bike room. We're also providing the comfort station, which is a restroom and utility closet for the open space, but that comfort station will be in our building, but accessed through the open space. And then there will be a approximately 6,000 square foot community facility space on the ground floor, entrance on 49th Street. And we've identified Indie Space as the tenant who will activate and operate that space. They provide affordable workspace for the independent theater community. So now getting to, I think, why we're all here. I want to start by talking about the program. What are HPD's homeless set-aside units? As many of you know, all projects that receive city subsidy are required to set aside a portion of those units for homeless households, folks who were formerly in shelter. And I do want to start to draw a distinction between supportive housing units, which these are not, and the services that will be provided here, which are housing retention and stabilization services, and what population those services are intended for. So first off, homeless set-aside units do not have on-site social services, unlike supportive housing. So that's one distinction. They're intended for clients who are home ready and can transition independently from shelter to permanent housing. Again, these services are distinctly different than your typical supportive housing services, which are, and these services are tailored for households that do not have significant clinical needs and do not require that higher level of care. I think we can all agree that there's a very large population in shelter right now, and there's a range of needs that need to be met for those folks. And again, these units are intended for higher functioning, home ready households with lower clinical needs. These units are leased up through a referral process in coordination with HPD and DHS. So the initial screening is done through DHS and HRA, who are making determinations who's suitable for supportive housing and who is more suitable for these set-asides with a different service provision. Then those applicants are funneled to HPD. HPD continues the screening process, and ultimately the referral comes to the landlord, us, the owner-operator, Douglas Inn and Actors Fund, through HPD for placement. These folks, since they've been in shelter, most of these tenants are coming with some sort of rental subsidy or tenant-based voucher to help them pay rent and help stabilize them once they're there. And I want to mention, we're very happy to be meeting with you today. I think we're going to continue to present, we hope to continue to present on this service plan between now and when it's implemented at lease up. But where we are now is having this conversation with you, starting to identify providers. We will be selecting a pre-qualified provider, and we've already started to receive proposals from those pre-qualified providers. But typically, the expectation is that the service plan is reviewed and finalized with that provider in place at time of marketing, which is typically 8 months before lease up. But obviously we're starting now and starting to review those proposals now so that we can fine tune the service plan with your feedback and with other stakeholders' feedback. 3 pillars and goals to the program. One is a successful and smooth transition into permanent housing. And then once they're there, to try to maintain and stabilize tenancy, right? And then this is a big part of it, this third bullet, which is really that linkage and connection to existing services in the community, which we'll circle back to in a minute. So to drill down a little deeper with those goals, I want to first talk about transition to housing. The intent is that there's a warm handoff between shelter and housing. So as soon as that placement is made, an assessment is done with the housing retention specialist so that they can ensure that the apartment is set up, help orient the new tenant to the community, help them understand building policies around, garbage and recycling and, all the house rules. In terms of housing retention, they'll work on, rent payment and subsidy management. If they're having problems accessing that subsidy through the voucher, help with arrears. First year recertification, that can be really onerous. As you know, when you're in affordable housing, you have to redo that every year, and it can be really daunting for some households, but is required. And then screen tenants for additional benefits as well that they might be entitled to. This is a really big one. It's connecting folks with existing services in the community. The expectation is not that the housing retention specialist will provide all these services, but that they can make referrals as needed to health and mental health care that may be required. In the event substance abuse treatment is required, linkages to those services, connections around supporting young people and children in the household. That is critical, particularly for larger households and families, childcare, education, and so on. In the event someone needs to access legal services, referral to free or low-cost legal services. Workforce development, education, job training, and then financial wellness and literacy. And then they'll also be assisting us, the landlord, right? Helping coordinate and access subsidies as needed in the event arrears are accumulating, intervene to help with that. And then consultation around compliance issues, again, that refers to the recertifications, and then mediate between tenant and landlord in the event that sort of mediation is needed. I think this is our last slide, but in terms of service delivery, the services will be delivered at time of move-in, right? We're trying to ensure that warm handoff. Home visits will be conducted during the first month. Monthly calls will be provided during the first year, so monthly check-ins as needed at the end of the year. If referrals need to be made for more intensive care, that will be done. And then, on a more, I would say, long-term basis, that warm line will be available as needed assistance available thereafter for both landlords and tenants for a more long-term period. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. I just want to reiterate that this, I think we're in the early stages of both developing this plan, identifying the provider, working with you all to get feedback and fine tune it. And we're looking forward to your questions, comments, and perspective. Thanks.
All right, so far I see Dolores, JD, then Katie. Dolores?
So Daniel, thank you for that. Really very impressed with such a comprehensive program around transitioning folks into housing. And I think that you touched upon so many areas that are not in people's front view mirror or side view mirror, sorry, one of those mirrors, to recognize that success in housing depends on all of those additional programs that you're adding, like thinking about financial wellness and literacy and workforce development. It's ambitious though, and a lot of the providers that we've seen come through here may have that on the books, that's what they can deliver. Just a little bit concerned about finding that right partner and whether you already have a lead on some that can fulfill that.
Yeah, we absolutely have a lead, and the lead is someone who we work with really closely on all of our properties. They are one of the pre-qualified providers. We've had meetings with them to discuss this scope of service. We're reviewing the proposal now. And I think the good thing is with us involved and with, folks like Tracy involved, like we have an expertise around this to ensure that, those needs can be met. So we're committed to doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. JD?
Yes, Daniel, I echo those comments. I'm very pleased with all the help you're going to give these people. I have one question and one comment. Did Actors Fund just change their name, or did they join with a larger organization? No, it's just a name
It's
change.
just a rebranding, name change to be more inclusive. No merger, no change. Ray Tracy, what's the line? Same organization, same mission, new name, or something like that. So
great. So my
COVID, we just found a lot of folks. We want to make sure everyone who can get help from us can find us.
Okay, my comment is about the phrase neighborhood orientation.
Okay.
I have an issue with providers or social service agencies that come into the neighborhood, and that is always a last thought, And this is an established neighborhood. There are people living here that have been here since the Lenape left. I think Joe is one of them, but this would be such an asset for these people if you or your organization first engaged with block associations, all those people here already, to help you out, to help those people out who are coming into the neighborhood, to show them, where the Ryan Center is, where all kinds of things they could help with. And I'm not fussing at you, Daniel, or your team, but this is once again coming into a neighborhood and not doing that easy homework. And I know you've been in contact with the Block Association, but please consider that. It would be so good for these folks coming in to know that they have supportive neighbors around them.
If I may, JD, thank you for that comment. I just want to say from my own background, if this is at all helpful. First of all, I want to say that Entertainment Community Fund, AKA Actors Fund, has been in the neighborhood for a long time. And we've really, over the last 3 to 5 years, deepened our services at Manhattan Plaza to a tremendous degree. I don't know if anybody here is a resident there, but if you are, you'll know that we have done a lot of work there. For myself personally, I was at Hartley House before I was at Actors Fund. And so I'm really excited to be bringing more services into the neighborhood. And I think your point is very well taken. I also, as part of my purview, work on volunteer services and community connection. When I was at Hartley House, I was a community liaison. So I welcome your statement, and I think that's something we will definitely include in
Tracy, that's great, but every block here, every block association, it's almost a different village. So
I know.
I mean, Manhattan Plaza is miles away in terms of all kinds of things. And when Actors Fund was coming to the meetings, people who were associated with theater came and said, oh, it's great, we're going to use that open space. We're going to program the open space. They did not realize how much the community had fought for that open space, and suddenly it was like going to be theirs. So I think I'm getting involved with the local. It's almost hyper local in this neighborhood sometimes.
Yes. Oh, no, I agree. And JD, I also, another program that I work on very closely is at our is the Skirmahorn building that we have in New Jersey, where we have a similar first floor program. And it, as you said, is hyper local. It is for local Brooklyn artists in the neighborhood. That's a big core piece, but we also engage our residents in that space. It's their space. So I think, you know, again, I hear what you're saying, and I'll make sure that we're including the block associations in our outreach.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, JD. Just really quick, Tracy, how long have you worked in the community?
So that's a longer answer, but as a social worker, I've been in the community for about 9 years. Prior to that, I was in the entertainment industry and worked in the community with my work, but also as a volunteer for different organizations because of my interest in the theater district.
Okay. And two more things, Katie, just give me 2 more minutes. I heard it come up 2 or 3 times, a pre-qualified provider. Can you just briefly explain what that is?
Yeah, there was some sort of RFP that went out for human social service organizations to provide these services. So there's like a publicly available pre-qualified list of providers that folks like us can choose from. Maybe someday the Actors Fund will be on that list as a service provider, but for now, organizations like Breaking Ground, which is a organization we work closely with, is on that list, and many others. But I'm happy to, that's publicly available, and I'm happy to share it with you, Maria.
Okay, thank you. And then
Yeah.
Daniel, how many of the units, again, I can't remember, will be homeless set-asides?
Good question. Sorry, I didn't say that. It's 15%, which is 23 units in this building.
Okay, and then Katie, I believe you're next.
Thanks. Thanks, Daniel. And in fact, Maria, that was one of my questions, was how many units are actually part of the set aside. So Daniel, you just said 23. And then can you tell me, and what size units are they? Is it a mix for families, or is it some of the studios?
So it is a mix. And I'll tell you, I think where most recently the numbers were, but as we wrapped up ULERP, I think that might have settled in a slightly different place. I think more aligned with some of the needs of the community. But when presented to the city council, there were 5 studios, 6 1-bedrooms, 10 2-bedrooms, and 2 3-bedrooms. And I know there was
I'm sorry, that was 2 or 3 3-bedrooms. Sorry.
I think there were 2 3-bedrooms.
Thank you.
That's what was presented to city council.
That's where we landed, Daniel. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. And I really appreciate, frankly, you addressing, that this is not supportive housing and sort of explaining that whole thing. So I think that's really helpful. You mentioned, which I thought was great, that one of the primary tasks of the provider with this community is going to be connecting to existing services in the community. And I know you said that you're going to be doing further presentations on this, especially once you have identified your provider. I thought it would be, I'd just like to ask that in those presentations, I think it'd be really helpful maybe if you identified some of the existing services in the community that you hope to sort of put people in touch with, you know what I mean? So that because I know that you guys have been in the community, and I think that would help demonstrate that you know all of the various and variety of resources that are available.
Absolutely.
Would that be possible?
Absolutely. I think we can absolutely do that. I think that will be part of our work, and the service providers. We already have a lot of that, I think, in place. And something that I think Tracy noted, and and I think it's important to be candid about this. We also understand that a lot of those service providers in the community are, reaching capacity, right? There's like a lot of need out there. So we fully understand that too. And I think that speaks to the need of expanding that list of resources, sometimes, outside of the community, to make sure people are getting what they need. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, that's been a big part of our conversation, Katie, and to the rest of the committee, and also to consider some of the things also that we are our resources, again, work on insurance and things. These are the things we're seeing a lot lately. Medicaid, the changes in Medicaid, Medicare. We have worked in that sphere for a long time, and I expect these families to need a lot of support around that. And benefit services, which we do have a lot of experience with in our own services in terms of a resource in the community. And also, with our housing corporation, just again, helping people understand the recertification processes, which I think is going to be a big part of the work internally. So we are taking a hard look at, because we're using those resources in the community all the time. So we do know, like for instance, the mental health resources and the work we're doing to move sometimes outside the community and to work with providers in the community.
Great.
We work a lot with SPOP. We're trying to get more a single SPOP they provide mental health services for seniors, and we're one of the only areas with the concentration of older adults in the city that could use a satellite there, and we've been working really hard to get one. So if that's like a kind of an example.
That would be good. That would be excellent. Joe?
Yeah, Daniel, I have 3 items for you that are based upon my direct professional experience in the past year that you have to consider. First and foremost, referrals from HPD DHS for the non-supportive families have not been home ready when they've been claimed to be home ready. And I'm talking some serious deficits. So I must tell you, don't take it with a grain of salt, take it with a box of salt, that the families that are referred may not necessarily be ready, willing, and able to be fully independent, because there's other issues that are not being disclosed to you by the shelter providers of the HPD referral. The second thing is, please add in your list of services, not just tenant landlord mediation. We have found one building tenant mediation needed.
Sure.
Because there's serious issues with a family with social service issues, back and forth with other tenants in a building. You need to add that in. The third is, and I'm really serious about this, you cannot do in the first year televisits or calls. The home visits tell the story. And I personally have had one family in the building that we thought everything was fine, and they kept postponing the home visits, and we found a nightmare situation in the apartment. That simple visit to the home tells you so much more. And again, it was a home housing ready family, no major problems, and things were being concealed. So by doing that, you cut off and do early addressing of problems to help people who are living with shame or issues or family stuff, whatever it may be, up front, and not letting it get so bad that it becomes now a landlord-tenant matter, because this hasn't been managed early on. So I really want to say that the board is going to recommend to you, no, you must do face-to-face stuff. We're getting out of COVID, and the touch and engagement with people really makes a difference.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. I mean, all those comments make a lot of sense to me. Home visits, tenant mediation. I think we'll bring that back to the service providers when we're reviewing the proposals. And I think you identified a critical part of this. Like, we will need to work closely with HPD to make sure that the referrals are appropriate. And I think a big part of this is, like, we don't have a lot of control over that. But we're committed to working with them to the best of our ability, ensure that the referrals are appropriate.
Yeah, but I want to note, you as the co-building owner here, you have the power of no. I was in a meeting just yesterday with Continuum of Care and HPD, and Katie, your eyes will pop out of your head when you hear this. We were told that if people are on the sex offender registry and they were living across the street from a school, we would still be required to take them into supportive housing. Well, the law says you cannot do that. So there's a desperation out there on the social service agency side from the city that you've got to be very, very, very wary and just thoughtful, because we do not want to have this affordable housing and getting these people properly housed and helped create any other problems. That's a good example of where DHS has lost its mind. So just say that to you, to be aware.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Yes, fully agree with Joe's point, especially that third one. Betty? Betty?
Yep. Thank you for your presentation. I think your social service program sounds wonderful. I just was curious, within the new building, how much space is set aside for the people who are delivering the services? Do you have like a first floor room? You have several rooms in parts of the building? It seems like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so and I'm sorry if this wasn't clear from the presentation, but these will not be on-site services. So these, and I think that's why what Joe's comment about the need for those home visits is so important, is so that there is that face-to-face assessment and contact with the tenant and the client, because this is not someone who will be operating on site. There'll be a housing retention specialist, well, likely two, along with a supervisor who will be operating offsite.
Well, if a person needs to meet with somebody for a referral or something, do they go to a offsite location?
Yeah, I think, well, I think there's a lot of options, right? There's home visits, there's remote consultations, and then that might be an option as well. But Tracy, do you have something to add there in terms of what that contact might look like?
Yeah, the home visits are very important. And I echo what Daniel said, and Joe, what you're talking about. And we're all getting back to 100% seeing clients in person. Again, I'll say at RKC, we've been back for almost 20 months, 5 days a week to see people in person. So that's a big part of how we get to understand where people are. To answer your question, Betty, we might, go with someone somewhere that we're trying to engage them with. That's another technique. But within those, a lot of those meetings, they will happen as home visits. Okay. But again, based on my work in the neighborhood, if I want somebody to go to the Ryan Center for the first time, I might take them to the Ryan Center for the first time to make sure that they understand. If I'm asking a parent to enroll their child in an aftercare program, the visit might look like helping them understand where the program is and getting them an introduction and bringing them into that. So there's a lot of ways that without a physical office, that face-to-face contact happens.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Betty. And Paul, Aurora, and Yadira. I would like to wrap up this section in the next 5 minutes. So if we could make our questions or comments kind of brief, as well as the responses, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Just a comment, it'll be brief. Hooray for the Actors Fund, the Entertainment Community Fund, or whatever they want to call themselves, just in terms of integrating experience with our neighborhood. I just wanted to relate to one and all. Joe knows this story. The Actors Fund, a neighbor of mine of 40 years was having a rough last lap in her time on Earth here. And interestingly enough, she had been a dancer earlier in her life and then was an autodidact and talked herself into a job with HPD for 30 years. Anyway, last few years, very rough. I had the bright idea of calling up the Actors Fund and asking if would she be covered. The answer was, well, of course. And they dispatched a very bright young lady who helped us through some really rough stuff there. So I just want the question I have to follow up on that is, it seems to me that for those who don't know perhaps about everything you guys do, this seems like you are slightly adjusting the focus that everybody who knows about you at all knows that you always lavished on the entertainment community, and you were branching out and in a sort of semi-executive landlordy way. When the term pre-qualified providers, well, for me, you guys are the pre-qualified providers, but now you're going to be helping us to find other appropriate ones for this enterprise, which sounds very wide-ranging, and I'm 1,000% in favor of it. Is that generally, is that sort of kind of what the idea is here?
Well, like I mentioned, we are we're a human services organization. So I think these are the type of services we could provide, but I think for this project, since we're not a pre-qualified provider, we'll probably work with someone who has more expertise in delivering these services specifically to this population. You're right, we're experts in serving everyone in arts and entertainment. And anyone who's eligible for our programs and services is welcome to access them. Like that, those would be available to those folks like they always are. Does that address the question?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted to sort
Okay.
of place you, it's the same, only different. Your status with this particular project, you guys have been doing this for a long time for those of us who are in the entertainment community, and now it's branching
Yeah.
out to other folks.
Yeah, sure. And just as a side note, when we started working on this project, the intent was to have an artist preference on it. That's currently not part of the project, and there's some obstacles to getting that done right now in the city, but we're continuing to work with the city to see if that might be a possibility as we get closer to lease up. But that's always a priority for us to serve the population that our mission says we want to serve. So,
If they live in CB4, I think it's a serious idea. It's good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Aurora?
Hi, thank you both so much for being here tonight. I just wanted to echo what Joe was saying about in person. I'm so happy to hear that you guys are very much in favor of this, because I think, as you could see from the toddler who was crawling all over me, it's so important that we go back to this kind of in-person meeting clients where they're at and having that face-to-face interaction. So I was really very happy to hear that that's the plan for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Yadira, you put your hand down, so there is nothing.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was just gonna thank you all for the presentation and echo what Joe and Aurora said. Yes, I think it's great that you all are going back to in person. And I just had one question regarding, will there be families with small children expected to live in these units? And if so, will there be a space where children can go, like maybe like a playroom or an open space for them?
So I would say for some of the larger household sizes, it's likely that there will be young children living in those units. We don't know, but I would assume so. There is not a playroom on site in the building, but the beautiful thing about this project is there's this wonderful newly designed public open space. I want to call it a park, but I'll call it an open space. And I think that's absolutely a place where residents will recreate. And
It is
and
legally
get-
not
yeah.
a park, but it is functionally a park, Yadira.
Yeah.
It will be right in front of the building, a very
And-
large park.
And there's a playground across the street too. Would it be welcome? Maria,
I guess, sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I guess my thought was thinking for the colder weather days, but okay, I guess some open space works.
Yeah.
Maria, I have one quick question. It's very important for me, and I'm sure everybody on this committee, that those folks coming into this building do not feel in any way that they are a different class of residents. And I'm sure you're going to make very sure that that does not occur. Right?
That's of the highest priority, I would say.
Great. And one other thing, we do have somebody on this committee who teaches financial literacy, who's an expert at it, volunteers.
I
Again,
wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I have volunteered.
those are the resources
Of the-
that
some
you
of the
already have here that you could reach out for.
So Daniel, put
Excellent.
your name down. Happy to help if that works in your program.
Thank you. We will start with this group first.
That's
If the
awesome.
resources are here, yeah.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. I see no members of the public with their hands raised. I've checked a few times, and this has been postponed a number of times. We thank you for coming tonight and making the presentation. I don't think we're going to be responding. I think you've heard from us. We don't need an official letter out of the committee. But again, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Talk to
you
you soon.
all
Thank
very
you.
much. Take care.
Great,
Bye.
Daniel.
Take care.
Hello,
We're
Gary.
going. What? Yeah, we're going to move to our next item, which is the Bayview 550 West 20th Street, corner of 11th Avenue. We have with us tonight representatives from the Empire State Development Corporation. Just to set the stage, this building is owned by the state. This YMCA was acquired for prison use. Pamela Wolf, one of our long-term community board public members, can tell you back in the 1970s, and functioned as a prison until Hurricane Sandy in 2012, when it was evacuated because it was flooded. And we then went through a whole process with an RFP, request for proposals, to redevelop the building. And it was, again, to set the stage, a very open RFP, not really mandating or talking about all kinds of uses. We ended up with a proposal that was chosen. That did not come to fruition for a very serious series of reasons. We're back. And it's now part of the Penn Station redevelopment, and it was announced as part of it. And even though Penn Station, the actual development is not going ahead at this moment, but it is approved, and that's the politics of it. There are about 1,600 units of affordable housing approved in general, and then Bayview approved as part of it. So they are inextricably linked. I'm going to turn it over to Angel and his team, and then we'll have a presentation and then questions from the committee. This was presented last night at Chelsea Land Use. Angel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you, Maria, for having us and the rest of the board. We're really excited to be here. You know, we know that this community is very intimately involved in this site and is very knowledgeable of this site. We are providing a brief overview for those who are new to this community or new to this project. And I know we saw a couple of folks recently early this week on a tour of the Bayview site. We've also spoke with some folks on this call now yesterday at the Chelsea Land Use. But again, we're going to provide a brief overview of the site, discuss our draft development objectives for the location, and then just to do a brief overview of ESD's process. And, we just look forward to, continue the dialogue with this community and also getting your feedback as we move from draft to final. And again, as Joe mentioned, this initially, this was discussed as having 60 supportive housing units as part of the Penn project. And although that's moving on a separate track, moving forward on a separate track, we wanted to make sure that this is moving forward as well, because this is a very important project for this community. So, again, we want to provide this brief update and continue to get feedback and move forward with an RFP that folks are happy with. So I'm going to kick it over to Gabriella Green, who is our VP for real estate. And I'm happy to pull up the presentation. If I have privileges to do so, I'll do that.
Yes, you do. You do.
All right, perfect. So I'll hand that over to Gabriella.
Great. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Community Board 4 for having us tonight. As Angel said, I'm Gabriella Green. I'm a VP for Planning and Real Estate at ESD and Project Manager for the Bayview project. We'll dive right into the presentation. As Angel said, it is just like a high-level overview. As we know, most or all of you are very familiar with the site. So we will leave plenty of time for a discussion following this presentation. So next slide, please. Our agenda will be just as we did yesterday, the same presentation, brief site description, some project history, some key takeaways and lessons learned from the road we've went down before, some draft development objectives to share with you tonight, and then an overview of the ESD process in general, a generalized overview of that, and then some particular next steps for us here at Bayview. Next slide, please. The site is, as you all know, on the corner of West 20th and 11th, and it's approximately 4/10 of an acre. It consists of 2 adjoining building sections. The 8-story west section, which faces 11th Avenue primarily. It's sort of the horseshoe piece of the building here. And you can see part of it is covered with the outdoor recreation area, sort of cage structure. And then the other building piece is the 6-story east section. So that's more around the corner on 20th Street. And that's here on the right of this photograph. Altogether, the building totals over 100,000 gross square feet of floor area. And that's at approximately just over a 6 FAR is its current built FAR. Next slide, please. And here to drill down a little bit more on the zoning, the site is shown in outline in red, is primarily within the special West Chelsea zoning district sub-area D, with a small portion further in on West 20th in sub-area E. Preliminary discussions with the Department of City Planning indicate that the governing zoning shall be the West Chelsea zoning district sub-area D. And that district allows for a base FAR of 5.0 and up to 7.5 by purchasing Highline Transfer Corridor development rights. We do not propose to allow for the purchasing of Highline Transfer Corridor development rights, but what we would like to propose is that up to the 7.5 FAR be permitted, such as long as the development is done in a way that furthers our development goals, so that the additional floor area is in the advancement of the development goals. And as I mentioned, the site is currently overbuilt at about just over 6 FAR, overbuilt to the base. Next slide, please. As you all likely know, the site is eligible to be listed on the state and National Register of Historic Places, and therefore requires consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, which we call SHPO. And that will ensure that any adverse impacts on the site are avoided or mitigated to the fullest extent practicable. And ongoing through all this process, what will be in coordination and working directly with SHPO. Currently, there are unsafe conditions at the site due to deteriorating masonry and some pieces falling from the facade onto the sidewalk. To address that, the Office of General Services, OGS, has an emergency contract in place to stabilize the facade and to put a scaffolding sidewalk shed to protect from any pieces falling. The existing conditions of the historic elements have been documented and laser scanned for future restoration, and samples of the decorative terracotta pieces have been preserved for future restoration. A future designated developer will be required to restore the facade, and it will be done again in consultation with SHPO. Another key site feature, less desirable than historic elements, but a fact nonetheless, is that it is located in the boundaries of a former manufactured gas plant site, and therefore is subject to an order on consent with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, which means that any work done on the site has to be done with their overview and approval. And especially if anything in the basement level is disturbed, which I imagine it will need to be due to our next major issue on the site, which is that it is in a high-risk flood area. And as you all know, and as Joe mentioned, flooded very dramatically during Hurricane Sandy. And therefore, all development that occurs on the site must comply with regulations in the New York City Flood Resilience Zoning Text Amendment and any FEMA requirements as well. Next slide, please. So just a quick touch on what, as Joe mentioned, the prior RFP process went out in 2014 in the spring, proposal selected in the fall, known as the Novo proposal. And then through a series of years, almost 5 years of work and evaluation and revised plans, that proposal completely fell apart and the team withdrew themselves from consideration for the development. A number of factors played into that. I think learning more about the site conditions, learning more about the cost of the flood protection and historic preservation, as well as having a team that frankly did not have the background or experience necessary to take on a project of this scope. So we're hoping to address all of those things by having more information in our request for proposals about those site conditions. We had feasibility studies and site work already done through that process, which we will share with potential respondents so they can incorporate that into their proposals. Have more eyes wide open going into it at this point, as well as having requirements for experience with these kinds of developments so that we get the right team on board and don't go down another 5-year path, resulting in the building just further sitting there and deteriorating, which is, I'm sure, what no one wants.
Or as we call it, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, shorthand, nothing. Next slide, please. So to sum that up, we seek to balance the project goals with the site challenges. We know that there's preservation costs, flood protection costs, site remediation costs, and we have goals of housing affordability and community facility uses here. So we're just trying to go in with our eyes open and make sure we can achieve as many goals as we can and keep in mind the costs associated with that. Next slide, please. So our draft development objectives at this time, I'll share with you here this summary, and we're here to get your feedback and comments on these, is primarily to benefit the West Chelsea neighborhood and surrounding community, to provide at least 60 units of supportive housing, to provide community facility use, to provide adaptive reuse for the historic building, incorporate green and sustainable building practices, and incorporate minority business enterprise, women-owned business enterprise, and service disabled veterans-owned business participation. Next slide, please. This chart is not meant to be confusing, and I'm sorry if it is. All I'm trying to do here is to talk to you all about the ESD process for how projects get developed. And we call that GPP, which stands for General Project Plan. So in column 1 here on this chart, you can see it's labeled community outreach. That's ongoing throughout the entire course of this process. So we're here even prior to launching a GPP at the pre-RFP phase, and we will be meeting with you all throughout the whole process. The GPP itself will come after we've already gone through the RFP and selected the developer, and that process will go hand in hand with the environmental review, which has a series of public meetings, public hearings, comment periods, and votes by the ESD directors. So it's a multi-step process, and this transpires once the development team and project are identified. And so then that's sort of the timeline for getting to the construction start. Next slide, please. But much more simply and much more near term is just to get our RFP process underway. And that's what we're sort of kicking off with you guys here today, in addition to the other meetings we've already mentioned. We seek to revise our RFP with feedback from you all and issue that RFP in the first quarter of next year. We will receive responses in the second quarter and make a selection by the end of the year, and hopefully be then on that next path towards full completion, and we can see something here as opposed to nothing, as Joe put it. And I guess that's it for my presentation, and we can open it up to questions.
Thank you so much. So let's start with questions from committee members, and then we'll start with Maria.
Yeah, just because I didn't ask it yesterday, I was curious if they could explain the reason they're not asking for the number of supportive units that are in the affordable housing plan that was created by CB4. Hello, little person. I love this meeting. So Gabrielle, I don't know, or if Angel.
Yeah, we I just wanted to mention that
Sorry, I'm here. Don't worry. I'm sorry. My husband's here. She just the door wasn't.
We understand this fully. Trust me.
Yes. So we did an early analysis of the existing building to look at what we could comfortably fit in terms of supportive housing units. We knew we also wanted to leave a community facility space. We wanted to leave, so we didn't want at that point to commit to something that wasn't necessarily achievable. But so that was a minimum, a baseline minimum was 60 units. That also happens to be about a good size. You wouldn't really want to go less than that in terms of a supportive housing building for the scale of providing the services. Once you have to have on-site services, you have to have an office there. You don't want to build up all that kind of infrastructure for on-site services and serve fewer than 60. So that's why we consider that the sort of minimum that we think we can achieve, but certainly are leaving it, at this point open to even more. And
I think we're asking you to increase the minimum in this discussion. That's really
okay. Got it.
And given the overall size of the building, irrespective of the community facility, as we know, walking through, there's a lot of space all over the place. So it's not like it's a tiny building. Another question, Maria?
No, I was just thinking I would prefer to set the bar higher than lower.
Understood.
Okay. Leslie?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Very ambitious project. And I wonder where this funding come from?
So a couple of places. One, and I should mention, they've joined us in some of the meetings, are not here tonight, but we're partnering with our sister agency, HCR, Homes and Community Renewal, and they are committed to funding the supportive housing component. So the state programs for both the construction and the operation of supportive housing are already kind of lined up. Additionally, we have, which is very different from the prior proposal, prior RFP, we're putting this out with a 0 purchase price. There was a competitive purchase price element in the prior RFP, which led to putting a land purchase price of approximately $20 million, if I have my memory correct on what the Novo presentation was. Maybe someone here knows better.
Yes,
but
yes.
That certainly is a resource that we are now dedicating towards making sure this project is viable and meets as many of the community goals as we can.
But let me just note That means there's subsidy in the land, as we have with many city-owned sites. That's a good thing. But also, just for Gabriella, we also have 10 very large towers being built around Penn Station. So there is a price that's being paid in our community. So the idea that it's zero, considering the amount of bulk that will be generated by the current approved plan, we expect 0+, okay? Because that's the nature of it. Let's go to Paul. Leslie, anything else? Paul, next.
Yes, just make sure I'm yes, I'm on. Just wanted to quickly touch on the historical preservation aspect. I remember, yes, it was a YMCA and a women's prison. What's the manufactured gas plant?
So before it was any of those things, it was an industrial site that was used to produce power through a process that was manufacturing gas. It's I don't know the ins and outs.
No, they actually just produced the gas.
Just the gas? Yeah, okay. It involves vats underground and tar residue.
And that was that the original building for that earlier purpose? And then
This building was no. This building was not used for that, just the site. And then
all right, fine. So
yeah, and then there may be remnants below grade, and that is something that has to be properly used.
So the Y they were the first builders on the site?
As far, yes, in the 1930s, I believe, is when the building was
I
constructed.
apologize for not remembering the original. Just in the inner portion looks like a typical Y building. That outer section on 11th Avenue, was that part of the original building as well, or was that added later? It was.
Both building segments were built together.
Really? Okay, thanks so much. That's all. I just wanted to.
And we have a pretty robust historic assessment that we've done, and that also will be included as part of the appendices to the RFP, so we can share that information.
Thanks so much.
Katie?
Thanks. Just a couple quick questions. So also, my first question was whether or not before the RFP even goes out, if you can increase that number, because 60 units does sound much too low. And so that would be lovely if that could be corrected. But I'm a little bit clear. I'm sorry, what, Joe?
You're being so polite.
You know, I try. But I'm sorry, I think I'm just not following something here. Is the RFP only for the supportive housing piece?
No, it's for the entire development.
Okay.
And that is just the ones at this point in the development objectives, that's the required housing component is the at least 60. And as I'm hearing, we are hearing your feedback, but I'm just going to consistently tell you where we are in the draft development goals at this point. But
okay,
and required community facility as well.
So I guess so as part of, if the RFP is for the whole thing, how many units or housing units are there expected to be for the whole thing? And I'm just wondering, sort of percentage wise.
So, well, that's, I think, to be determined by the proposals we receive. There is a existing 100,000 square feet of building on the site. There is about 24,000 additional square feet of floor area permitted up if the up to 7.5 FAR of the special district is used. So that makes it about 124. These are rounded numbers. You would assume a fairly substantial amount for the community facility. And then the balance would be for the housing uses. But leaving it to proposals that would depend on the supportive housing. I think we all expect it to be studios or 1 bedrooms. That's typical. Maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe it would be supportive housing that's larger. It happens, but it's not typical. But maybe the other units would be a range of sizes, and therefore that would dictate how many the overall unit count is. But we're not prescribing a particular unit count other than the minimum required supportive
at this time.
At this time. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, and it also sounds like you're not prescribing like a percentage of.
Well, that's an interesting. Yeah, that's not the way we have framed it, as a percentage.
Or even of like, I'm sorry, what, Joe?
At this time.
At this time. We can just assume, should I put at this time in my screen name? At this time?
Okay, and it sounds like you yeah, that you haven't also thought about maybe doing like either square footage, like at least this many, percentage square feet have to be, or yeah, anyway, we want more for the supportive housing. And then, obviously it sounds like with the flood risks and the former gas issues, I mean, obviously there are lots of challenges, and it seems like that's one of the reasons why the former party backed out. I guess I'm wondering, have you gotten feedback that there are people interested in replying to this RFP, given all of these challenges?
I not personally, but we haven't we haven't done any kind of real advertising of it or anything like that. So, once we do have that ready to launch, we will share it on our website, share it in a press release, blast it out to HCR has an entire list of community partners and developers that they can share it with you all. And hopeful that we can cast a wide net and get the appropriate team.
Katie, let me just put in perspective. It's a former YMCA. Across the nation, former YMCAs have been converted to supportive housing. The key is to have a zero land cost. Yes, there are, quote, challenges, but that's all we have on the west side. Multiple developments are above manufactured gas plants at this point. The entire block, Redison Parking, was between 17th and 18th. 10th to 11th was the gas plant.
Yeah, I was frankly thinking more of the flooding, but yeah.
The flooding, everything along the west side, and truth at this point is the flooding is a specific thing we incorporated into Chelsea NYCHA when we did the whole rego there.
But
it's not.
Yeah.
It was very onerous before. Now it's just part of the equation. So I think we're gonna be fine with that. As we know, Gabriella, like the mechanicals are not going to be in the cellar here going forward.
Right.
Everything's going to be elevated above, maybe on the second floor. So and it works now too, right? Because the world is different. It's not boilers. It's going to be, this building might have to be electrified to meet all the local laws the city has put in place. Things like that change the calculus of how stuff is done. So yes, developers, both for-profit and not-for-profit, will line up for this site. Believe me. Let's go to Roberta.
Thank you guys for the presentation on the RFP. I had a number of questions. The first, I am just curious. There is a pretty structured timeline for this project. And previously, the timeline was not kind of adhered to. It seems like the primary reason for that, though there were others, was just the cost of the land. What makes you believe that you will be able to adhere to this timeline? Do you think it's realistic? Could you contextualize your feelings around that?
Yeah, we think it's realistic. We think it's ambitious, but we think we've learned a lot of lessons and we have a lot more information now. We're going in with a better perception of what the challenges are, and are hopeful we can work with a strong team and really make it happen.
Just for committee members who are not here for this last go around, the bottom line is the development team selected was completely inexperienced and did not know how to manage this site, let alone the additional challenges. For those of us who met with them, we could have pulled our hair out of our heads at every meeting because they would come with, once they came to Chelsea Land Use after they had totally been awarded and said, and by the way, we're ready to go, and we need 14 zoning text amendments to do the building that they proposed. Like a year and a half into it. It was and then they changed architects, and then they changed financial backers, and they were so, the state can't say this, but we can. It was like working with someone who walked off the boat yesterday, and they're going to redevelop a major building with huge encumbrances. They were totally out of their depth, and they would come and give us PowerPoints to say what a wonderful job they were doing in services when there wasn't even a building proposed yet. So we're really happy to be at this spot again, and thank you, Gabriella and Angel, for getting us to a different spot with this, because it was a nightmare.
That is very helpful context and gives me some greater confidence that this is a achievable timeline. I mean, this kind of builds on Katie's concerns, but how is ESD thinking about the different potential safety concerns, both from like the facade for the and like structural safety concerns with this older building, and then any potential environmental hazards related to the gas plant. I think I am clear on what the resiliency stuff looks like, but I would be curious about the structural and gas plant specific modifications that would be evaluated to keep potential residents safe.
So we would be looking to find a team that has experience working with historic preservation, specifically calling that out, so that we can evaluate the work they've done in the past. Oh, sorry, the steam is on. And if we can see that they've achieved, success in prior projects, that gives us a good sense that they'll be able to work with necessary, security and safety of stabilizing this facade here. In terms of the manufactured gas plant, it's, as Joe said, they're over on the west side, they're in Gowanus, they're in, lots of parts of the city, and on DEC is well versed, the State Department of Environmental Conservation, in what needs to be done to make them reusable. So it involves excavating as much of the remnants that you encounter and sort of encapsulating with an impermeable barrier to ensure that no residues or fumes or any elements of that could come into the building. So
and venting if needed also.
Yes, absolutely. So there are these known procedures, and they are under the guidance and regulation of the appropriate agencies. We have a lot of agency partners on this, and we absolutely rely on their expertise in vetting the teams and the proposals.
I also want to know, Roberta, the building is beyond structurally sound. I did my 6th or 7th tour of this building on Monday. It is, even in its closed state, so well built. We were expecting, Angel and I were talking about this, that it was going to be a hell of a lot worse inside. It was dirty and messy, but it is solid like a rock because it was built as a Y. Ys are overbuilt because they have pools and gyms. So structurally, it's really, really intact. It's not even intact, it's solid. So
that is very good to hear. I heard some potential concerns about that previously, but I'm glad to hear they're not major. And then I have one final question, which was that, Gabriella, you mentioned that there is the potential with this site to build up to a 7.5 FAR. And it sounds like that would involve some sort of change or addition to the existing structure. And I am curious, given, of course, that there is interest from this community in serving more people than the minimum required, by the RFP, how you were weighing when you're evaluating different proposals. Is there a favor or favoring of an adaptive reuse of the existing space, or is there extra value to a proposal that ultimately proposes building upon that and increasing the amount of buildable floor area? I don't know if there's a way that when you are evaluating these proposals that you're weighing those two things.
At first for the adaptive reuse, that's part of the development goals. So certainly looking at keeping as much of the structure as is possible. And then only if any additional floor area is added, if it advances the development goals. So is it providing additional housing? Is it providing funding for community facilities? What is it doing, right? What are you doing with that additional floor area, and how much does it advance the goals? So, and also, architecturally sensitive additions, we're working, as I mentioned, with SHPO, and they look for that kind of thing as well. So something that is designed in an appropriate fashion.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Betty, you're next, and then Maria will take over for a second.
Yes, thank you. And I've unmuted in anticipation of talking. I had the luxury of thinking some more about this since I was in Chelsea Land Use meeting yesterday. I think it's important that the proposal for the increase to a 7.5 FAR from 5, that needs to be acknowledged a little bit more in the proposal. I know you said that it's all would happen if there's a very useful use that could be accommodated, but I kind of forget, last night you said something about it would need a zoning override or waiver.
Well,
or-
it wouldn't go any more than what is permitted in terms of the FAR, but in order to do it in a way that isn't making it the site pay into the Highline Fund, that would be the part that we would propose to override, just the payment to keep the resources within this building.
But it would be a zoning override?
You know, I would have to definitely check with the lawyers about what that is exactly. But yes, it's something like, it's a zoning override, but not to change floor area. Because
I get it. It's
permitted.
you're separating it from the Highline element.
From the fund.
Yeah.
Right, but Betty, understand the state doesn't do it. The city does the zoning override. The state can choose not to be subject to local zoning. So it's a different administrative action. That's all.
Thank you for that. That's correct.
But I think it would be important to acknowledge that it has to have an action to do that. And the other issue I was thinking about is that I believe the last time we went through this proposal that that applicant was proposing to put an addition on top of the building. And we objected to that. So I think that's an issue that needs to be really thought about carefully in terms of what you would do and where you would put the extra floor area. So that, I just think that's a very sensitive topic. And also, new topic, wasn't mentioned here, but the mental health units dealing with people struggling with mental health issues. I think that needs to be put in the proposal. That's part of our affordable housing plan. And this is a little outlier, but when we were talking about it for the last proposal, that it would be housing for prior residents of the prison, maybe sort of a minor thing, but it was kind of a nice, because people were who had been in the prison were part of the planning committee for the applicant, and it had kind of a nice nice ring to it.
It had a nice ring, but it meant very little in the end. That's the problem.
I know, but I liked it, you know. And then the last thing is, I know, Joe, you said that the building is very, very structurally strong, but maybe it was just not an appropriate way the last applicant was looking at it, is that finally they decided that there were such serious structural problems failing to support the building. That's what I recall. Maybe I have.
No, you're right. They were just lying to us because they wanted to demolish and build a new facility. That's the plain cold fact. They were lying.
Okay, so that on that part, well, that's what the case that they made. So I guess I took that away. Anyway, I just love that this building has a future and a good future, and I'm thrilled, having spent many years suffering through the last proposal. So just go for it, but do listen to some of the issues that the community has. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Gabrielle, you can see we've had great affection for the prior proposal.
I can tell. I didn't work on it.
Dolores, followed by Maria.
So echoing Betty, so happy that there will be a life to this project. So that's great. But I really want to reiterate what Katie said her expressed disappointment in the number of proposed supportive units. Gabriella, you mentioned that you work with your agency partners. We're an agency partner as well, being a community board, and the work that the community and this committee put into really taking a look at what is possible at this site over the last proposal and this proposal really looks towards maximizing the amount of supportive that's possible. And this site in particular is well suited for that, mainly because it was a Y, it was a prison. So we would like to see a very serious consideration of ensuring that we are looking towards providing as much as possible with this very special piece of land.
Maria?
I guess, Gabrielle, I wanted to ask you I heard you mention up top that there was an open RFP with Novo. And I mean, would you say that part of the reason that we are where we are and Novo backing out is because it was an open RFP, or is that?
I from what I gleaned from the process and what happened and my, conversations with those who experienced it directly and my reading through of the documents, it truly seems the biggest flaw was a team that was not capable. That if you had an open RFP and a team that was capable came back with something that they knew how to do, I think that could have worked. So I'm not 100% kind of faulting the RFP, but certainly more specific development goals and resources that we already know can provide those goals being both like linked together in the RFP should be helpful, as well as requirements about prior experience and, evaluating it from that perspective.
The lack of parameters, Maria, was a factor because people applied to do many different uses in the building. And then you added on top of it, the awardee was an experience. But like there were so many diverse kinds of ideas. Here we're at least getting parameters. And I think we're going to want to make them even stronger to sort of pin down what the use will be. The development community, a lot, Gabrielle, as I've said, they appreciate specificity. Tell us what you want and we'll respond on how to do it and finance it. When you give it widely open, it creates lots of issues that create conflict and then disagreement down the road. So we're very focused on that as we go through it. Maria, more questions about it?
No, I was just going to actually ask you, given your expertise, being on the board a long time, being in this community a really long time, I really value your opinion. I think the entire committee does. And if there is anything that you would add that you think that is really critical here.
I have a list after we finish committee members asking. I have a list.
Okay.
Because it really flows out of our housing plan too. They really have to get things. We want to get elements in here and make sure we preserve things. JD?
No, I was just going to add that in my mind, it's, and I don't do this for a living, but it sounds like it's simple and you make the RFP more specific and you hold people accountable. Like, this is what we want. This is what we need. And no bones about it. This is what the community is asking for, and this can be done. And who's going to apply? In my mind, it's simple, but I know it's not.
I think it's a combination, just to
chime
in. It's a combination of being specific about what you need and being specific about how you're going to fund it, right? And you tie those things together.
JD?
Yeah, Gabrielle and Angel, thank you for this presentation. Very clear, not defensive. Really appreciate your approach. My question is to Jessica, if she's still here, or somebody on Chelsea Land Use. Last night, what were your concerns, Chelsea Land Use, from last night? Or maybe Hector was there.
Well, Carrie is in the
Carrie's here. I mean, have they already been raised tonight, or were there other concerns that Chelsea Land Use had?
Let's hear from Jessica.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, just had to step out for a second. I mean, there are significant concerns about the preservation. We know the issue. I was corrected. They are not tiles, but materials. But the terracotta materials that were removed from the building. And the appropriate reuse of the tiles, the pieces that were salvaged, as well as the appropriate replication of the additional items of the spaces that exist within the building, and to really ensure that not only is the building officially recognized as a landmark, but that the elements of the building are maintained, that the key historical elements are maintained. There are concerns about just building and going, some of the things that were alluded here to tonight, and changing how the building fits in within the context of that area. And I'm sure we'll hear more from Carrie and David, who are both here. But generally, I would say that, the concern is about preserving the building as it has been designed and utilized, and that, as was mentioned, I think people are hopeful that this can happen immediately. Or I believe was mentioned that that there's, we don't know how long this RFP process will take or the development will take. Meanwhile, we have a building that is really subject to the elements, potential flooding again. The tiles have fallen down, are currently sitting in the ground floor, and that restoration should happen immediately. And I think that was a significant concern, and that not necessarily be tied to the RFP and selecting, and that we not wait to pass this on to the next responsible party.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm sure there are others, but that I would say that hits some of the pieces.
Let's go to Hector, please.
Hi, how you doing? As a resident, a longtime resident of Chelsea, I know this spot is very valuable when it comes to public access to individuals who don't have the opportunity to take advantage of a recreation center as large as that one can be. My concern is not just for that, but also flood resiliency, like everybody, so few other folks have mentioned, that once this location is developed, that after a storm, which is very likable, probable that the facility be, in operation, not operational for a while, a length of time. So I would like to see in the RFP that you mentioned that there be a time constraint or restriction as to how long it would take to get it up on the ground. Proper insurances obviously be implemented for that project, just in case something, heaven forbid, would happen like that for that location, because we would hate to see a valuable site like that be unused for a while, for a year or two, like we've seen in some other areas that happened during past flooding. So basically, that's my concern. And also to keep it affordable for the neighborhood or free, obviously. That is of great importance. I mean, we have very limited access to recreational facilities in this area. And it's in high demand, obviously, for a community that is not exactly on the rich side. There's a lot of folks below the poverty level in this vicinity, even though there are very expensive neighbors like Google and some other companies in the area. Sad to say, there are very poor families here that would really like to take advantage of such a location like that. So those are my concerns concerning that location.
Thank you, Hector. Any other committee members? So first, I'd like to go through a couple of things for the team.
Excuse me, wait, Joe, we have Carrie.
I know I had her brought over. I'm asking for committee members first, and then we'll go to Carrie because she also. Carrie, do you want to speak anything about last night first? Any more comments, as Jessica did?
I only have one thing to add from last night, and then I would like to speak as well after you, Joe. But I think that what Hector is touching upon is that what I haven't heard tonight that we talked a lot about was the community use. So to be very specific for everybody for what that means is there's a pool in this building. So there's a gym in this building, and there's an industrial kitchen in this building. So we would like to see that the pool, the gym, and the industrial kitchen are, remain so that we can use those for the community.
Thanks. We'll come back to you in a second, Carrie.
Yeah.
So I want to stay on the housing part for a second, and also a presentation to Gabrielle and Angel. In RFPs or this PowerPoint presentation, words matter, right? And what you say. The first is I'm going to suggest that you don't refer to the site as a certain percentage of an acre, but you say what the lot area is and the building square footage, because it sends a signal this is a site to be developed as opposed to a building to be adaptively reused and or get some sort of modest addition. The second thing is you say in one of the items in your presentation, minimize public subsidy, right? I'm going to suggest you say that instead that use public subsidy within program guidelines, right? Because it's really important that there's not a signal that let's go build a lot of market rate housing to make sure the state doesn't have to put up money when you've already said it and it's part of the whole discussion. So we really feel that it's an important thing for you to get out there because there's probably more than one public subsidy, not just supportive housing. For example, like through NYSERDA, there's whole electrification programs, right, that are being done in general, just to make it clear that you're not saying don't go after public programs to make this public facility and affordable housing work. Instead, get to that market rate. So I think that's a signal to make sure it's clear. The next one is market rate. I have got to say from this committee, and I'm going to be speaking for a lot of members of our neighborhood, you've got to absolutely say in this discussion, and by the way, this is a political statement I'm making, and I know it's going to be settled politically, that there will be no market rate housing included at this site. The rezoning of West Chelsea, the rezoning of Hudson Yards, and now this major plan with a GPP for Penn Station will bring thousands and have brought and will bring thousands of units of market rate housing. Our public sites are like gold. This one has to be reserved for 100% affordable housing, period. Next, supportive housing. The board has looked at this. This is a corner site, which means lots of windows around an avenue and a street. This is housing for single individuals, not for families. The floor plates are way too big in the annex of the building. And we've looked at it very carefully and really recommend this is all about singles. So that means smaller units, studios, or as we talked about on the site tour, even shared apartments for single individuals. Next item. In our affordable housing plan, we've called for psychiatric beds. And we said to you in a number of meetings, we never had a community saying, please give us psychiatric beds in the facility, right? Well, we also talked about it, that how is that funded? What is the program? What's going on? Well, actually today, the governor announced a new program called Step Down Housing to fund wraparound services for psychiatric beds and as a transition. Well, the truth is that that's a great new model, which we brought up like 5 or 6 months ago, and now there's some funding for it, for a version of it. I think we need to look at that as a piece, as part of this, not that $60 million or whatever that's set aside there, but specifically to say that a portion of this building, our community has talked about it for people with serious and untreated mental illness. This is a great location, and not the full amount, but a certain number of beds. Next, very concerned when you use the phrase restore the facade to the extent feasible. What this is a red flag thrown in front of the entire preservation community of Chelsea, extent feasible. You've got to figure out better language there, because we don't want to come up with an argument where there's some proposal and now we're arguing over whether or not something happens. You should note what elements of the facade will be restored. In that tour, we did see the damaged terracotta tiles. We know they're not going to be able to be reused, but you've got to note out and replace terracotta. Just call out the things that are the real historic elements. It gets rid of so much dispute and argument, and it brings everybody into the fold. The next thing is, I think you really just have to make it clear this is an affordable housing RFP with a huge community facility piece in it. And I've also raised to our state senator and to our Senate member-elect that they're going to need to find some money here for this community facility. I don't think that an affordable housing development can take the freight entirely in a building in a flood zone and has historic renovation to entirely fund a community facility. Like, that's a thing that's very real. And we want to assist you to make sure this gets to success, as opposed to having to argue, well, you can get your pool and gym if you have 40 units of high market rate housing. So then we have an argument over, this is the price you pay back and forth. But when we know we have 10 buildings around Penn Station of high market rate housing or commercial development. So the more you know, it's 100% affordable housing, increase the number of supportive housing units, include the psych beds, and also note that there will be I'm assuming there will be an Article 11 tax exemption here. You can't do this kind of affordable housing without a real estate tax exemption. And that's how it all done in the city of New York. So these are elements, put them in early to help give the development, not-for-profit and for-profit community that you're really putting things out to make it work for success. So I've given you a pile of crap. Could you just respond on some of it?
Yeah, I will. I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, thank you for your comments on the language, and we can certainly clarify in the PowerPoint, and we should do that and make things more legible and intelligible. In terms of the psychiatric beds, we met with you last month, and I reviewed your, the community board's housing plan. I have it literally right in front of me. And I've been doing a lot of outreach to sister agencies on this. So HCR, isn't the lead on that kind of thing because it's not permanent housing, but they and others have connected me with the OMH and the DepSec for the social services population of agencies. And we're doing that legwork and research now to find out about viable programs, new, existing, layers, or otherwise, to
Make it up as you go along or
to see
something.
what we can do, right? So I think, as we both have been saying, we want to have achievable goals, and you can't exactly just require psych beds and not provide resources for that. Doesn't. So we're looking into that. I'm not at this moment prepared to say we've solved it, but I'm definitely, we're taking all of that very seriously, and really appreciative of this community's embrace in trying to address this crisis that is citywide and statewide and nationwide. And that's really bold and not something to be taken lightly. So we fully appreciate how forward thinking and inclusive your housing plan is. So we're working to address that. So we've already talked the language, we talked about, and I appreciate, and I think you heard our feedback about the community facility, which is to make this a real community facility that has great programming, great uses, great facilities, and is affordable. Again, that's something that doesn't magically appear for free, right? So I appreciate your conversations, and I want to be involved and hear more about how that's progressing with the electeds. If that could be identified, that would be absolutely incredible. And it would take away some of the pressure of trying to figure out how to meet all the massive goals and just make it sustainable and viable. So I absolutely look forward to continuing that conversation with you.
Tax exemption.
And the tax exemption. Oh, we absolutely we're assuming it wasn't necessarily going to be Article 11. There's also 420C. There's also the state powers that can be utilized to eliminate property taxes. So we're considering all of those as the way to get the tax abatement.
But you'll note it so it's clear, which helps the financial.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up with this group, and I should have, because you're quite sophisticated, but it's already an element of the document, and we'll make it very clear.
Thank you. Carrie, let's go to you now for items on this.
Thank you. And thanks again for the presentation for the second time in 24 hours. I appreciate it. And I'm sure you don't want to hear from me again twice, but I'm going to say what I said last night, which is I really appreciate, and we all really appreciate you coming and talking to us and helping us be a part of this process. I do want to say that the RFP to me is sort of set up like it's a burden. It's a burden piece of property versus a very, very valuable piece of real estate, which, as we know, it faces Chelsea Piers. It is on the water. It is super premium for Chelsea. So I understand there are some issues like flood resiliency, but that's the case for if you live anywhere west of 10th Avenue, half of 9th Avenue, you are in the same boat. So I do understand there's some challenges.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
The water metaphors
the water meter boat. But so it's a really, really, people are going to want to live there. And speaking to the FAR, I appreciate that 7.5 FAR increase if the respondent meets the development goals is what you're asking for. But what I don't understand is that we have a very vague description then of the development goals. And I think you've heard that from a number of people already. Like, it is not specific enough for me. I want to know what the increase in supportive and affordable housing numbers are. I want to know, and I'm speaking, I guess, as just a Chelsea resident now, I want to know what you're going to do in terms of the community center, which I'm kind of getting the vibe that it's like that might be the biggest issue. I think that we maybe need, Chelsea Land Use might need to do a better job making sure we help you understand why, you know, sort of the promises that have been made in the past from NYCHA through NYCHA and those development projects that never were realized, and why I think there's a lot of pressure on this building to kind of realize those promises, like the pool and the gym and the kitchen and, you know, work programs and things like that. As well as restoration. The restoration of the terracotta tiles and preservation. We know what we want preserved. You know, we toured, we know we have some very strong preservationists on the committee and in the community. So we can give you the list of exactly what that is. And I, for one, would like to see some of that language in there. I know I mentioned last night to you that I also object to the phrase of, you know, to the extent possible. I kind of object to the description of the community center, because it's sort of like, we'll do something, which, you know, could be really small. And lastly, I was just going to ask you if you could please share the feasibility study that has been done for this property, as well as you said there's a historic assessment that's been done. That would be great. So those are my comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Also, Gabriella, I did respond to HCR and sent them the plans from OGS that they asked for, which they weren't able to get. I did that yesterday, so they can look at the base plan of the building. Also sent, as you may not know, we can send it to you too. The community board did do a sort of back of the envelope look at the various uses in this building. It was this committee that actually reviewed it about 2 months ago, Jessica, or 3 months? Something like that. Yeah, 2 or 3 months ago, where we sort of blocked out, here's a portion for residential supportive, here's a portion for community facility, here's a portion for the psychiatric beds. And we looked at it to try to understand how it could possibly fit in. That's not a be all and the end all, but it's at least an initial guide to see how this could work. The other things I want to caution you on, and let's go to the addition question. No matter what, there should never be, these should not encourage or permit an addition on the main part of the building. We really feel strongly about that, because it is a coherent historic piece. The question of whether or not an addition is able to be done on the annex is separate. They were built in different times, but if you look at the facades, they are the same building and they read the same all the way across. And that's why you will have preservation people very concerned about this. The last piece is, and Carrie spoke about it, it's not a by the way, Carrie, it's not a 7.5 FAR increase, it's a total 7.5 FAR. And yes, we don't want this to be a knockout, drag out fight with a successful proposal where we're arguing about this is an inappropriate addition, this is something that's got market rate. Like, we want to get rid of that political fraught stuff now, to know that we're trying to get the same thing at the end of the day. So given that, I'd like to bring over 2 members of the Chelsea committee who were there last night, David Holoka and Pam Wolf. Hear from Pam and then David. Nellie, can you bring them over? They've had their hands raised patiently. Okay, Pam, you have the floor for questions. Pam, I know you're there. There you are. Go ahead.
There I am. Did I show up?
Yes.
Hi. So you spoke of the strong preservationists on the Chelsea Land Use Committee and from the Chelsea neighborhood, and I represent part of that voice. We spoke last night about the terracotta. It was a great shock to us to see the amount of destruction that happened under the auspices of I guess it's a contractor that was hired by ESD to do what was called emergency work. My strong feeling is that the emergency work should have been handled simply by putting the sidewalk shed and getting the bridge in place. At that point, the danger was past. and the rest of the destruction may have just happened by an overzealous subcontractor. I'd like to think that that's the case. A little supervision would have saved a great deal of pain having to do with this. I would like to know if the remaining terracotta plaques that are in place now, still the few that remain, are they safe, or do we expect to see those disappear as well as part of this emergency?
They are not in the
repair?
current contract. That portion of the building is not under the current contract. That facade, I think that OGS has also considers it at risk. And so we will work with them on what to do with any future work on that portion.
And Pam, just for information's sake, it is not Empire State Development. Department of Corrections controls the building. They engage with Office of General Services of the state that deal with all state facilities, who then in turn hired a contractor. So it is several steps removed from ESD. I'm not going to for a moment say that it was properly handled and communicate it, but at least we know that that's the process these things happen. So can I just ask you, Gabriella, to clarify that? So therefore,
Right.
is the OGS contractor done in terms of facade stabilization? And on the remaining plaques, is there further evaluation or anticipated any action being taken on those being removed for facade stabilization? Is that a good way?
My understanding is
question, Pam?
that my understanding, and thank you for that clarification about OGS managing the contract. That my understanding is that the remaining portion of the building is not under the current contract. So that if something else is to occur, it would be under an additional contract.
So then let me ask you again, if in fact there is a need for it, can you work with OGS to commit to notify the community board in advance of anything happening, so we're not in the same position we were with the past?
We can do
And
that.
SHPO.
Yep,
Well, both
they are-
SHPO and the community board to know if there's any further action.
Yep.
That was a yes, Gabriella?
Yeah, it was. I'm just taking a note.
Got it. Pam, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. That's primarily what I wanted to make the point, that it's just terribly important that those remaining historic features do not wind up in another container, smashed to smithereens. And I could see it happening. We know that this has happened in the past with other properties, where suddenly you turn around and you look up and it's gone. And you say, what happened? And they say, well, we had an emergency. We had to handle it right away. And sorry.
Yep.
It will just be tragic if that happens.
I just
I'm
wanna
hoping
ask
that
about the presence of the sidewalk shed, because that was also something at some point my agency had gotten community complaints about, that getting that sidewalk sheds down quickly was also a request. And so that, those two missions are counter, because if you're going to leave those terracotta panels in place for restoration, you're going to want the sidewalk shed underneath them, but then that means there's a sidewalk shed. So it's just something
I think if you balance the two, the sidewalk shed, God knows we live with sidewalk sheds for decades in place. And then that's a fairly remote location. In any case, I don't think you should. I'm really sorry that you felt pressure from the community, but perhaps to get rid of the sidewalk shed, it really hasn't been there that long to begin with. But I think that the plaques and the historic preservation take precedence over that for sure.
I just want to note, as I mentioned at the site, that there's an incredible amount of distrust because of the prior RFP and the incredible poor, and nothing to do with you guys at all, of the poor communication back and forth. And we're trying to overcome that by having this conversation be very open, very transparent, and very clear. And we thank you for responding to us. David, sorry, Pam, anything else?
That should do it.
David.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to address that language, which you've already raised, Joe, of passing along the requirement that the terracotta should be restored to the extent possible. We shouldn't even be passing that language along. It should simply be repaired now by whoever did the work and did not notify SHPO. That's a requirement, whether it was Department of Corrections or OGS or ESD, and it's hard for me to believe that ESD wasn't aware that the work was going forward and let it happen without letting SHPO know. I called SHPO and the work stopped almost immediately. Those remaining 6 locations along the top where there's tile, those are still in place since I made the call back in August. That also tells us that this isn't work that had to be done for life safety purposes. When we went on the walkthrough and were shown the size of pieces that were potentially falling off the building, they're like breadcrumbs, and there was a sidewalk shed in place. The whole argument that this SHPO wasn't notified because this had to be done on an emergency basis does not wash. It doesn't pass the common sense test, and someone should be held accountable and find the funds for restoring the terracotta rather than passing it on to the RFP respondent. And who knows when we're going to get an RFP respondent and when they're going to do the work. I would remind you that we had a winning RFP respondent 8 years ago. And I don't think that the building should be left without these tiles for who knows how many years. And, we just kick it down the road into the sweet by and by. We also want to make sure that the replacement tiles are terracotta, and that as much of the existing tile work as possible is put back into place or left in place and restored in place. It's standard preservation practice not to replicate, but to preserve as much authentic historic fabric as possible so that when people are looking at the building, at least some of it is the way that it was originally installed. ESD and OGS and DOC can argue among themselves about who is responsible, but we need some accountability here. And this needs to be made right now. If whoever it was who started that demolition work really should have involved SHPO at first, and the scope of their project would have included preserving or restoring the terracotta and not just destroying it. And, it's really shameful that there were like 28 of these locations and we're told that 22 of them just disintegrated. We don't even have the pieces carefully enough removed to put back. It's, it really is horrible. And this needs to be made right. The other thing I want to talk about, last night when this was presented to CLU, it was the first that I heard that there would be a market rate component. It raises all sorts of questions. We're told that market rate will be accepted to the extent that it advances the development goals. Well, does that mean part of the existing 100,000 square feet might be private development so that the rest can be supportive housing, or that the additional 25% of area that you're looking at might be market rate? I completely agree with Joe that there should be no market rate.
Yeah. I want to go right to the heart of this. Whatever was discussed last night, you're now at the housing committee, not just the land use committee. And we are saying flat out, I can speak for my colleagues, that there cannot be a market rate component on this very rare public site controlled by the state. So I would ask you, David, let's not talk about market rate anymore, because from a public perspective, this is our message to you. And by the way, we know that's why you're here, to hear various pieces from us to understand the issues around how to make this happen. So I think you've heard that. And I'm just going to ask committee members, so you can see, do any committee members support market rate housing or market rate housing component at this site? Anyone? Yeah, I'm just so you can hear. And and we're from all walks of life, different organizations, different things that we do. You're not going to get support for that. And that's going to be a truly underlying issue in the politics. Next, I want to take us back to 30,000 feet. We know the mistakes that have been made with these terracotta tiles, but I am the absolute eternal optimist. And I believe that this is an opportunity, that there can be full restoration here. There is no question in my mind, because the state is going to look at this, and this governor is looking for good opportunities. And the fact that we offer another opportunity on top of it, which is psychiatric beds, which I don't think you have 95 communities across the state saying, please put psychiatric beds in our community. So putting all this together, it's how we cobble this together and get the political will to get you, ESD, multiple sources of funding to make this thing happen. And I really want to say, let's work toward that, knowing that that's what we want to have happen here. Is this a hopeful end, a note to end on to my folks at ESD? Yes?
That's hopeful. We appreciate your partnership. We appreciate your feedback, your input, and I'll take it as hopeful. I'm an optimist too, Joe. I'm a glass half full person.
Are there any other members? I only see 2 members of the public. No one has asked to speak. Carrie, can you just talk to us a little bit about this process going forward so everyone understands what's happening in the next month about this?
Did you say Carrie?
I'm sorry, I meant Jessica. She's the one who
Okay,
talked about
just
that.
checking.
I apologize, Carrie.
No, Carrie, we have been on this together. Yeah, we can both do it, but I'm unmuted now, so I'll just say quickly, we're at our January board, we're going to have a public session about this, a public hearing rather. ESD will be joining us yet again, I believe, and we'll get another opportunity to hear from the community, additional comments and thoughts about this plan. Then each of our committees will have this matter come back with the goal of writing a letter that will be brought to the next following board meeting with a recommendation and to, concretize the comments that were made here. We're hopeful that in kind of a parallel path, we really appreciate Gabriella and Angel's, openness and participation, and that there can be some, iterative communication that's happening that will ensure that the RFP can continue to be refined to reflect these goals as you're getting a preview of them and will be formalized in the subsequent board meeting. Carrie, anything I missed?
Yeah, our committees will be meeting in January, taking this up again, and to go into the February board meeting for a final joint position.
Okay, that was my question for you all. So the committees will put it together into one recommendation.
Oh, yes, yes.
Not per committee.
We are familiar with the joint letters.
Good, got it.
Thank you all for coming this evening. And Maria has one new item, new business item, which we entirely forgot about. Maria.
If we're done, I'm going to say goodnight.
Yes, thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you for waiting to be the second item. I appreciate that.
No problem. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Yeah, for new business, I was just going to mention that today I visited the Watson and with Eric Botcher and Natalie from Whaleman's office, and I can't recall who else. Oh, people who are on the board at a building that's on the block.
On a co-op board.
On a co-op board, thank you. Co-op board. And I will frankly say that Joe visited previously, and when him and I discussed his visit there, I thought he was exaggerating about his what he saw there, and I was flabbergasted. Okay, so I'll just briefly say I did a mini tour, the first floor. Residents, that's what they call them. Residents come in, they register, they get COVID tested. If they're positive, they go to an isolation room on site. They receive an ID that they have to scan in and out. They find out where individuals are going, like their next stop, because many have family or friends in other places, and they make those connections happen. There was social services, like to get health insurance, legal services, interpreters for the deaf. There was a case manager. Then we went to the cafeteria. Immediately, I could see it was very different from a DHS site, extraordinarily different. And
it was clean.
It was, well, not even, yes, clean, but what made it extraordinarily different for me was there were bottles of water out. There were snacks out for people like bananas, chips. I found out that the food is getting catered. The hot meals are catered every day. They give the residents a survey to see what kinds of food they prefer. And there was something else. Tomorrow, they're starting something different with the food. They're going to be served the food. So they get on a line and the catering service is there to serve them the food. And currently, they have no rooms available. They have over 1,000 residents at the site. And the biggest issues from the community that were brought up are the bikes that are out front. And the issue with the smoking was before, but Joe, when you visited and whoever else visited made the recommendation, you can have smoking here. They followed the recommendations. They were very open to feedback. They were not defensive, not defending everything that happens, just very open, and kept saying, any suggestions you have, any feedback, we'll take it. The other two big issues were some people in the community are complaining about the loitering and sometimes the loud music that is after midnight. And so they, have 2 guards outside now, and they're trying to address that. But even the people who live at the co-op board said it is different than when it first started. And it's significantly different than when the previous shelter was there that was run by Acacia.
No, that was Black Veterans.
Veterans for Social Justice. It's just that I have Acacia on my mind a lot lately. Thank you for clarifying that. And that is the information. Aurora, do you want to ask something about that?
No, I just wanted to make a comment about that because there's a huge difference between the Watson here on 57th Street and the skyline on 10th Avenue, and just visibly the difference of
night and day.
The presentation, like the skyline is boarded up by actual wood, like they're out, and I didn't even know the Watson was not operating as a hotel anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Dolores?
So I think it's important for us to document what good looks like. And in order to do that, obviously we trust in Joe's and yours account of what you've seen, but I think that we need to either have the co-op residents come and present what they've learned and what's changed, or either or some type of presentation. I think we need to put it on the agenda so that we can be on record, and for all of us as a community to also hear what the response has been, and then we can be on record to DHS to say, here's the model, it already exists.
Amen.
Let's take a look at how to do that. So that was the one thing. Again, my instinct would be immediately to go ahead and say, let's write a letter, but we need to hear a presentation on it, not
validate.
Not just, I went there and I saw it, Maria, and I know I trust everything you say, but I think for the public in general is so that we can present this different type of look. And separately, I was gonna just remind everybody, the Hope Count is happening this month. Next month, January. Roberta, you've probably signed up already. Katie, you probably signed up already. They don't have end of line this year, Katie, so we're not going to be on the subway. But for those of you, this is very important to think about the homeless situation in our community. The Hope Count happens every year, and what this allows is that information to provide to quantify what are the resources needed. So they choose probably the coldest day of the year in January, so that we are finding people that are truly street homeless in order to understand how many there are. And then part of that day, we also have an opportunity, if we do engage, to get people services if they're willing to take them. So please sign up, nyc.gov, HOPE, HOPE count. You can search within the nyc.gov website.
Thank you, Dolores.
And Dolores, I would just say we should probably pop a note to Jesse and remind him to put it on our website, how people can volunteer for it.
I emailed him the link for that.
All right, Roberta.
Follow up with that. That's
excellent. And Sabrina, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. What's the provider? I know you said it, but I just missed the name.
Oh, you're right. I actually didn't, but it's been mentioned before. It's HERC.
It's Health and Hospitals Corporation.
It's Health and Hospitals, but HERC.
Oh.
HERC is the name of the facility, but it's but they're running it directly.
And
Because I think that's crucial here. I think what happens with most of the shelters is a provider thing. So it comes down to that, honestly. DHS is just, I mean, they're a contractor, right? They contract the provider. So I think that's crucial, the provider.
Yeah, we have an institution in the city, Health and Hospitals, actually running a facility as they run other facilities across the city. So that's why I think
I didn't know they were a provider too for shelters.
No, they're not. This is their first
This
go
is
at
the
it.
first time. Okay.
Maybe we ask Herc to present.
Okay, maybe that's what we need to do.
HERC is not a thing. That's the name of the facility. That's the humanitarian resource thing.
Oh,
It's
sorry, Health and Human.
HHC, right? Yeah.
Different acronym.
the other thing,
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. And the other thing I failed to mention, now that Sabrina spoke, it reminds me, most of the residents that are there are actually from Venezuela and a few other Latin American countries, and some from
And West Africa too.
That's it, West Africa, because I knew it was Africa. I don't remember where in Africa. So
Senegal and Gambia, both.
But a majority of them are from Venezuela. The other thing is, there was one more thing I needed to share about it. Gosh darn it, I forgot.
While you remember, maybe someone will make a motion to adjourn at 8:39. Anyone?
I can make a motion, but Maria's going to remember after we voted and hung up. So Maria, you can send us all an email.
Okay, yes, I can do that.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. And I want to thank everybody for really serious, solid questions tonight. This was a very, interesting meeting with the Bayview, and thank you all for really getting into this. Thanks a lot.
Very interesting. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Holidays.